Hi, thank you for joining us today. Lee, if you could turn off your volume, that would be fantastic. I can hear you typing. Hi, thank you for joining us today. We'll be doing a tour of the Old City. Lee, if you could turn off your volume, that would be fantastic. I can hear you typing. So we have a delay. We'll be doing a tour of the Old City. Lee, if you could turn off your volume, that would be fantastic. I can hear you typing.
It's echoing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I had a whole introduction. I don't know what happened, but thank you all for being here. I appreciate you coming along. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties in the beginning, but here we are together. Grateful we could take this trip to the Old City in Jerusalem when the times are a little bit challenging and we can't travel as much. We're so happy to be able to bring this to you and share these special moments together. I am Cheryl Dorchinsky. I'm privileged to be the founding executive director of the Atlanta Israel Coalition. The Atlanta Israel Coalition is a nonprofit. It's a 501c3. We believe that together, our voices are louder, our light shines brighter, and we could be a greater force of good within our communities and across the globe. Want to thank our promotional partners who basically jumped in for our last tour, and we've gotten this wonderful surprise bonus tour from it. I want to thank our sponsors who have, generously given to help make this happen. Your contributions are what makes us be able to perform these incredible programs and share with you. So thank you for sponsoring Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta, the Orbita Wealth Management Group, the Evans Family Foundation, and Martin A. Goldberg. Very grateful that you helped us make it possible to have this wonderful tour. And now, with no delay, I'd like to introduce David Sussman from David Sussman Israel Tours. He's our fantastic guide. We are so lucky to have him here with us. He's an international speaker and a world-renowned tour guide. David, welcome. Thank you for being here. I can't hear you, David. But I'm positive whatever you're saying is very interesting. Also, if you have questions,
great.
This is to the audience. If you have questions, please just type them in the Q&A and we'll ask them as we go along and make sure everything is answered for you. That's our goal.
Great, Cheryl. Just make sure that I'm pinned so that everybody can see my video. And thank you. Thank you to Cheryl. Thank you to the AIC, to the Atlanta Israel Coalition for giving me this opportunity to bring Jerusalem live to you on this beautiful evening. Check out the beautiful blue skies here in Jerusalem. The weather has been rainy, and thank God for that, as it only rains here about 6 months out of the year. It's not like Atlanta or most parts of the world where you get rain throughout the entire year. We only get rain here from basically Sukkot, which is October time, to Pesach, which is April time. So when we get rain, we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We thank God for that. And but today we're thanking him for these beautiful blue skies so that we can bring you Jerusalem today. My name is David Sussman. I run a tourism company here called David Sussman Israel Tours. And I am so ecstatic to be bringing you Jerusalem, the Old City, all 4 quarters. And I know many of you joined me last week as we witnessed the lighting of the Hanukkah, the Hanukkah menorah, live from the Kotel. We saw the ambassador, David Friedman. We saw some big rabbis who came down there, beautiful speeches, and we got to see a little bit of the Jewish quarter. But today, we are taking a closer look, a deep dive, if you will, for the next 90 minutes, exploring all 4 quarters. But before we even get to the old city, I want to bring you just around over here so that you can see a little bit of the new city. Because when tourists come to Israel, our focus is on Jerusalem. And when our focus is on Jerusalem, our focus is on the old city. And when our focus is on the old city, it's generally focused on the Jewish quarter. And when it's focused on the Jewish quarter, it's really being focused right into the Western Wall. And as a side effect, sometimes we get this tunnel vision and we forget to look at everything else. And look how beautiful our modern city of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem is. We have an incredible metropolitan city here, the likes that you would see in any major city around the world. We have, the symphony and an orchestra and playhouses and great hotels and restaurants and culture. And all of this sprung out over the last 150 years, maybe 160 years. That's right. 160 years ago, if we were standing on this exact same location, we would see absolutely nothing behind me, nothing but barren hills. There was only the old city. And believe it or not, in 1850, the entire population of the old city, or the early 19th century, I should say, not already 1850, but the early 19th century, early 1800s, was only 1,200 people. Today, Jerusalem is 1.2 million. It's the largest population of any city in Israel. It's also the largest landmass city of any city here in Israel. But what began this mass exodus from the old city into the new city? Well, in the middle of the 19th century, with the advent of the steam-powered engine, Jews from around the world and Christian Zionists as well, Christians who wanted to visit the Holy Land, instead of having to trek on horse or, depending where they're from, maybe camel or donkey, they could actually take a steam-powered train half the way or a boat across the Mediterranean. And you had Jews from around the world who began to return here to Eretz Yisrael and fulfill that dream that many of us have shared for generations, to once again return to our holy city, to our holy land, to our promised land, to the land of Israel. And so they went on that great pilgrimage and they came here. But when they got here, they said, how could I actually ever go back to that place that I was once from? And they tore up their return tickets, and the population of the old city exploded. And it literally doubled in size in only a couple of decades. Well, in the middle of the 19th century, the 1800s, who's ruling the land of Israel? The Ottoman Empire. The Turks are ruling the land, and they do nothing to improve the quality of life. And with this mass influx of population, there wasn't enough aqueducts and cisterns in order to provide fresh, clean drinking water to the population, and disease spread like the pandemic we're facing right now. People were dying. People's children were dying. And when that happens, you better believe it, you're going to call out to God. And they screamed, Hashem, Hashem, please send Moses to lead us on an exodus to greener pastures. Well, call out and you shall receive. Of course, it wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, who led us out of Egypt, but another Moses. Hashem, God sent Moses Montefiore, a very wealthy English individual who invested a tremendous amount of money here in Jerusalem, and he builds the first neighborhood, not the first Jewish neighborhood, the first neighborhood outside of the old city walls in 1860. And the sun's just over there, so you might not be able to get such a good view. But come on over here, just across the way over there, there's like a small community of houses with red roofs, and there's a little windmill over there. That's called Mishkanot Shananim. And that was the first neighborhood, 1860, the first neighborhood to be built outside the old city walls 150 years ago. And today, what do we have? We have an incredible 5-star city, beautiful hotels. We have the Waldorf Astoria over there and the Mamilla Hotel and the David Citadel. And we have cultural hotspots and just a tremendous amount of building that took place here over the course of the last 150 years or so. So it's important to realize the miracle of the returning of the Jewish people from around the world to the land of Israel, and particularly here into Jerusalem. But let's get started with the old city. So come follow me over here. The old city walls. First of all, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, how old is Jerusalem? Who was the first person to establish Jerusalem as our physical capital, to go along with the fact that this is our eternal spiritual capital? Well, we're talking about none other than King David, 1000 BCE. That's before the Common Era, right? BCE, that's 3,000 years ago. So if King David establishes Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people, the physical capital, go along with the fact that this is our eternal spiritual capital, how old are the old city walls that we have here today? So the fact of the matter is that these walls aren't old. Well, I should preface that with saying they're not old for Jerusalem, right? They might be old for Atlanta. They might be old for any city you find in America. But here in Israel, not so old, only about 500 years. It was in the 16th century that Suleiman, which is Arabic for Solomon, Shlomo in Hebrew, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, Suleiman the Magnificent, of course, the self-proclaimed magnificent one, built these walls. In fact, come with me over here. You'll see at Jaffa Gate, the main gate here into the old city, for literally thousands of years, because if it wasn't this gate, it was another gate. And why was this the main gate? Well, guess what? When you come to Israel today, how do you arrive? You arrive through Ben Gurion Airport. 100 years ago, and for millennia before that, if you were coming to Israel, where did you arrive to? You arrived through Jaffa, the ancient city of Tel Aviv, right? Tel Aviv is a new city, there's ancient Tel Aviv, Jaffa. And this was the road that went to Jaffa. So all those pilgrims would land and would dock in Jaffa, get on some type of shuttle service and bring them to Jerusalem and enter through this gate. So come on over here. You can see there's an inscription on top of the gate, and it's in Arabic. And that is a dedication inscription to Suleiman the Magnificent, who built these walls. But how old are the walls? I already told you they're almost 500 years old, but take a gander over here. Come a little bit closer here. You'll see that these stones it's almost a quilt. It's a hodgepodge of different stones, because when the advisors went to Suleiman and said, hey, you want to build a wall around Jerusalem? It's going to cost you like billions of dollars. Like, that's a huge undertaking. We got to quarry the stones. We got to cut the stones. We got to stack the stones. We got all of this building, all of this construction. It's going to cost you a lot of money. Suleiman said, wait a second. When I look around Jerusalem, I see stones everywhere, because Jerusalem, since the days of King David, 3,000 years ago, has been conquered and reconquered and conquered again over 36 times. Sometimes there was a wall and sometimes it was destroyed. Sometimes there was no wall and a new wall was built, and then that wall would be destroyed and another wall would be built, and so on and so forth. And so what we have over here is a quilt of stones that come from different time periods. Over here, you have Ayubid stones, 1,100 years old. You can see the first couple rungs of stones, right? They almost just look like field stones, right? These are, not chiseled out to perfection, don't look so beautiful. But you come on over here, and you can see stones that have a beautiful frame on it and a protruding boss. And this was also a strategic way of building your walls. So somebody who was using a catapult and throwing stones at your wall, instead of hitting a flat stone that might inflict a lot of damage, it could hit the side, and the cannonball would just ricochet off, and a lot of the impact would be deflected. Then you have some stones, right? So this is already from the Second Temple period. This is from after the story of Hanukkah that we just celebrated. But you have other stones like this stones, right? That have like a diagonal tooling to it. You can see it's got a little bit of a design to it. And that design tells me that that's a Crusader stone. That's about 1,000 years old. Here's another one with just a beautiful frame, but there's no protruding boss to it. It's still flat. Another time period here in Jerusalem. In fact, we could spend an entire day just walking around the walls of the old city and talking about the stones and talking about the people who chiseled them, quarried them, built them, and why they chose to design the stones that way. But we'll leave that for another tour. Come with me as we actually go through Jaffa Gate and enter into the old city of Jerusalem. Hallelujah. This is amazing. But before we even go there, as many of you know, Jews at their homes, they all have mezuzot. They have mezuzahs, right, at the entrance of their house to protect them. There are is parchment inside with psukim, lines from the Torah that are in there, protecting the dwelling. But it's not just our homes, it's also supposed to be put on the gates of our city. But how many gates of how many cities in the world actually have mezuzot? The only one I can really think of is Yerushalayim. But this is a very, very special mezuzah. Why? So what happened in 1967, when we liberated the old city from Jordanian occupation, is that we took these shells, the bullets that were in the walls all over, we melted them down, and we made mezuzot for the door frame. So this is actually made from bullets that were fired in the defense or liberation of the old city from both 48 and 1967. And I have to give credit where credit is due. A friend of mine, another tour guide, he always calls this not a mezuzah, but a mezuzi, uzi, right? Uzis were developed here in Israel. So he calls it the mezuzi, but it's really the mezuzah. It's a very, very important mitzvah to keep. Of course, this isn't the mezuzah, it's the scroll inside. So if you have a mezuzah at home, but you only have the case, you better talk to your local rabbi and make sure you get a scroll to put in there as well. So let's go in. And you can see as soon as we enter the gate, we got to make an immediate left-hand turn, 90 degrees. This is a defensive mechanism because back in the day, people would be riding their horses and coming into a gate, they'd have to make that very difficult turn for horses to make that 90-degree turn into the old city while defenders are firing their bows and arrows and their spears and whatever else they're using to defend the city. But come on over here, we have a map that I want to show you. And the map is of the old city. Again, these walls are only 600 years old, or about 600 years old, but they basically follow the same path and the same line as the walls that were here during the Second Temple period. Slight modifications, but basically the same. Today, it is divided into not quarters, 25%, 25%, 25%, but rather living quarters for 4 different groups of people. And we're going to talk about them now. So you have the Christian quarter, right? Christian theology is based on crucifixion and resurrection. And many Christians believe that that happened at the Church of the Sepulcher, which we're going to see at the end of the tour. So make sure you stick around. So many Christians believe that's where it happened, and built all around there, developed the Christian quarter. Then you have the Muslim quarter. And even though Jerusalem, there is no real connection between Islam and Jerusalem, at least not in any of their scriptures. There's an oral tradition that this is where Muhammad, in his night journey, again, there's an oral tradition, it's not part of the Quran, leapt up into heaven and met Allah, and this is where he got the prophecy to write the Quran, which is like their Bible. So they believe that actually took place where the Dome of the Rock is, which is where our holy temple stood. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. And all around here developed the Muslim quarter. Then, of course, you have the Jewish quarter. We're going to focus a little bit on the Jewish quarter and the Armenian quarter. Armenian quarter? Who are these Armenians? And why do they have a quarter here in Jerusalem? Well, believe it or not, the Armenians have a very, very long history, and we're going to talk about it as we walk through the Armenian quarter. But on what lines are these quarters built upon? So roughly about 2,200 years ago, give or take 50 years, there was an emperor by the name of Hadrian. We're going to talk about him as well a little bit more in depth later, who destroyed all of Jerusalem, knocked it down to its like every building destroyed. And he built a Roman city, and every Roman city has 2 major streets. It has the Cardo that runs north to south, and then it would have a street called the Decamantis, which runs east to west. And so these 2 major streets still divide the quarters. Cardo, Decamantis, Christian quarter, Muslim quarter, Jewish quarter, Armenian quarter. And if you take out the Western Wall, believe it or not, the Jewish quarter is the smallest of all the quarters. That's what's so mind-boggling. Anyhow, let's walk a little bit through this area, which would be part of the Decamantis. This is the grand entrance for most people into the Jewish quarter. And it is being developed even as we speak, if you can imagine that the Jewish quarter could still be developed. you have this beautiful hotel over here. It's called the Imperial. And believe it or not, the Imperial Hotel was recently purchased by a Jewish, what's that called? Investment firm, development firm. And this is going to be turned into a beautiful hotel. And the old city at the entrance, which sometimes doesn't necessarily feel so Jewish for people who've been here. It's sort of in between the Christian and the Armenian Quarter. There'll be a little bit stronger of a Jewish presence here in the old city. So come, let's continue walking. And we're walking on what looks like, well, it doesn't look like it is, these beautiful cobblestones, this limestone street. And it looks very ancient and it looks very old. But the fact of the matter is that it's really not that old. Believe it or not, this used to be a tar asphalt street. And about 12 years ago, they were redoing the sewer system here in the old city and the electric lines. And they dug up. And what they found right below where we are right now, what they discovered was an ancient, like right around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, synagogue, right? A Jewish house of prayer, which is important to realize because you have this deep connection of Jews here in Jerusalem throughout the ages, but you have this viral anti-Semitism in the world really headed by the Turkish government today that's screaming that there's no Jewish connection to Jerusalem. And while he's saying this, the president of Turkey, we're discovering these ancient synagogues right here under the ground. Over here to my right, you can see what is known as the Tower of David. But the fact of the matter is, it probably has nothing to do with which David. We're talking about King David, right? Really has nothing to do with King David. In fact, King David may have never set foot in this area because the old city during the days of David Amelech, King David, was slightly to the east and slightly to the south. It's not even part of the old city today. So why do they call this the Tower of David then? It was called the Tower of David during the Crusader period. And the Crusaders climbed up to the top of that tower and they looked down at the valley on the other side of the wall. And there was this big, reservoir of water. And there was a young woman there. And she was, bringing a flock of sheep or goats to drink. She was doing some laundry. And they said, this must have been where King David looked down upon Bathsheba and fell in love with her. And this, of course, is where Solomon, they have a child, Solomon, King Solomon comes from. So this must have been the tower that David was on. So they called it the Tower of David. But it was really built by King Herod. King Herod, a lot of people think is a great king of Israel. Let's not be confused whatsoever. Herod was not a great king. In fact, many of us here call him Herod the Horrible, not Herod the Great, because he killed tens of thousands of innocent people. But what was he good at? He was good at building. And he constructed, the temple. Watch out. He constructed the temple that we think of today in the Western Wall. He builds Masada. He builds Caesarea. And these are all places that we hope with the Atlanta Israel Coalition that we are able to visit on future tours. So if you don't mind here, if you can walk a little bit backwards or just swing the camera around a little bit. Perfecto. Keep walking. So we're now walking through a little bit of the Armenian Quarter. And you can see there's a little bit of traffic. There'll be some cars that are coming around. This is one of the few roads that cars can kind of traverse through the old city. Most of the streets are very, very narrow. You might see some mopeds zooming along or scooters. But for the most part, this is one of the only roads that cars are allowed to pass through. So I just want to mention, as we're walking through this little alleyway before we get to an important place, it's all important, it's all holy, it's all amazing, it's Jerusalem after all, and that is the Atlanta Israel Coalition. And Cheryl did a fantastic job talking a little bit about the work that they do, that when we unite together, and what are we talking about? Of course, we're talking about Jews, right? The Jewish people united together, but not just the Jews, the world, people who believe in scripture, people who believe in the Bible, people believe that this is the home of the Jewish people, no matter where they live, that this is a home and they want to support Israel. Well, Atlanta Israel Coalition works tremendously hard making Israel real for the masses around the world, not just in Atlanta, but really around the world. And go ahead and give a little thumbs up in the comments if you can, and let us know that you come from somewhere else from Atlanta, because I'd love to see how many people are tuning in from other cities in America or around the world. We just made a left-hand turn, and it already got so much quieter, and we just stepped into the thick of the Armenian Quarter, which might be a little surprising because there's nothing really around us. And that's because most of the Armenian Quarter is on the other side of the walls that you can see here and the walls that we're going to be walking through. Most people only visit the Armenian Quarter to get to the Jewish Quarter. And the reason why they have these walls is really over the course of hundreds of years to protect themselves from the Muslim conquerors who ruled this area for almost 1,400 years, and the Armenians were persecuted from them. But how did the Armenians get here? So the Armenians actually have a very, very old history. They've been here for like 2,000 years. And what happened 2,000 years ago? 2,000 years ago, the temple was destroyed in the year 70 CE. But it wasn't just the Romans who were here fighting. The Romans had to hire mercenaries, and not the A team, right? The A team wasn't around. B.A. Baracus wasn't flying anywhere. They had to hire other mercenaries. And who did they hire? They hired Armenians. And when the war was over against the Jews and Jerusalem was desolate, the Romans scratched their heads and said, hey, maybe instead of you guys being mercenaries, speaking to the Armenians, maybe you guys become, instead of mercenaries, merchants. We'll give you a section of Jerusalem, and this can be like a way station, a place that you bring and import from the Far East or the Middle East or the Arabian Peninsula, and then you can distribute it to the rest of the Western world and bring it back to Armenia. They took that, they were tremendously successful and very, very wealthy. In fact, the Armenians for about a decade in the 11th century ruled Jerusalem. And when the Crusaders came here, in that same century, a little bit later, many of them married Armenian women. And so the dukes and the lords and the ruling class of Jerusalem during the Crusader period were half Armenian. So they became very, very powerful. However, most of the Armenians who live in Jerusalem today do not stem from those ancient families, but rather they arrived here, and these posters are a little bit tore up over here, but you can see the Armenian Genocide that took place between 1915 and 1923, when the Turkish government systematically went around Armenia, stole like a third of Armenia, which they still occupy to this very day, and brought them into, the pictures are quite graphic, so it looks like people tried to rip them down, but see if you can come get a closer look at some of these pictures here, you would think these are pictures that come from the Shoah, come from the Holocaust, right? They systematically murdered about 1.5 million Armenians during these 8 years, known as the Armenian Genocide. And those Armenians who had the ability to escape, well, you better believe it, they did. And many of them actually came to Jerusalem because there were so many international diplomats here in Jerusalem already at that time that they were safe. So most of the Armenians who live here today really arrived during the Armenian Genocide, 1915 to 1923, which means that they've been here for roughly about 100 years. So like I said, this is really a conduit as we walk through the Armenian Quarter, which is almost entirely on the other side of this wall. And they have soccer fields and basketball courts and a supermarket and their schools and courtyards and gardens and really a beautiful quarter. But if you want to go there, first of all, the Armenians are very, very nice. There's no danger in going into sneaking, I should say. You're not really welcome sneaking into the Armenian Quarter. If you were to go in there, some moves likely they invite you inside their house, have some baklava, have some coffee or somebody, and they're very, very nice people. However, it's generally very, very quiet and very private over there. Tourists aren't going into the Armenian Quarter unless somehow they get tremendously lost. And just like that, we are leaving the Armenian Quarter and we are entering, anybody want to guess? Where are we entering? That's right. We are entering the Jewish quarter. How do we know? Well, there's a sign. Welcome to the Jewish quarter. But what's interesting about that is underneath it says restored 1967 to 1983. Why did the Jewish quarter need to be restored between these years? Well, we need to remember from 1948 until 1967, the Jewish quarter and all of the old city fell to the hands of the kingdom of Jordan. The Jordanians ruled this area. Now, Jordanians from Jordan didn't come and move to Jerusalem. Jerusalem really wasn't so important in the Muslim world at that time. So they told the Muslims or the Arabs who were living here in the old city, hey, we just took over Jerusalem and we threw out all of the Jews. And by the way, it wasn't just Jerusalem. They threw the Jews out of Bethlehem. They threw the Jews out of Hebron. They threw the Jews out of Shiloh. They threw the Jews out of Shechem. They threw the Jews out of all of the biblical heartland of the Jewish people, right? The mountainous area, the place today that people would call the West Bank. And I hate to use this term because so many people use it that it doesn't have the dramatic meaning behind it anymore. But they completely ethnically cleansed the entire area and made it Yud and fried. They made it free of Jews. They got rid of all of the Jews. Simultaneously, what happened to the area that became the Medina, the state of Israel? Well, the Jewish nation went to all the Arabs who were living here and said, hey, welcome. Here's a passport. Here's citizenship. You now have equal rights to any Jew, Christian, or anybody else who's living here in the land of Israel, which means free healthcare, free education, and all of the other socialist values that the Jewish nation brought with them when it was established. But what did the Arabs who were here, what did they do to the Jewish quarter? You know, many of you are from Atlanta, right? But around the world, if somebody came to you and said, hey, you know, we just kicked out, you know, all the Jews out of what's the big Jewish area there in Atlanta, Taco Hills, right? If everybody said get out of Taco Hill, and somebody, hey, here you go, here's Taco Hills for you, or here's Sandy Springs. You know, what are you going to do with these beautiful houses? You're not going to destroy them. You're going to move into them or give them to your kids or something like that. But instead, what did the local Arab population here do? They destroyed the entire Jewish quarter. So when kids who are 17, 18, 19 years old and were thrown out of their homes violently during the War of Independence in 1948, in 1967, when we liberated the old city and we returned with great enthusiasm and excitement and tears of happiness running down our cheeks, thinking to ourselves, we're going to return to the home, right, that I grew up in, they found that everything was just a pile of rubble. It had all been destroyed. But like so many times before, what did we do? We dusted off our knees, we stood back up, and we rebuilt ourselves and our neighborhood, but even stronger and better than before. So come follow me as we go into the heart of the Jewish quarter. And what I want you to notice is as we walk into the Jewish quarter, you'll notice that a lot of the construction, like what we see over here, right, is new. And you can see a lot of the destroyed parts, right? It was probably some type of arch that came over here and other buildings. We tried to preserve as much as possible to include it in this new architecture, but it was all destroyed. And so the Jewish quarter, unlike the other three quarters of the old city, there's four quarters, unlike the other three quarters, the Jewish quarter looks new. You can look straight ahead, you know, 3-4 stories high. These are all residential apartments and homes of Jewish families that returned to the land of Israel. And nothing was good enough for them other than living in the capital, the physical capital of the Jewish people. But really, for many of the religious families that live here, it's about returning to our spiritual capital to be as close as possible to the Holy of Holies, which is the conduit between everything that's physical and everything that's metaphysical and everything that's spiritual and everything that's infinite and everything that's beyond what our finite minds can possibly fathom. So according to Jewish literature, scripture, according to the word of God, if you believe it, is that this is the place that all of our prayers ascend to heaven. And this is where all the brachot, all the blessings, all the answers, all the shefa, all the bounty, all of the beauty from what we'll call Shemayim, from the heavens above, from the upper worlds, from the abode of God himself, from the Kisei Hakavod, from the throne of glory. This is where it's all coming down from and emanating from. So let me ask you, who wouldn't want to live here? Come on, everybody's going to want to live here in the Jewish quarter, which is also why the prices here are more expensive than they are in Manhattan. Of course, today you can get a good deal in Manhattan as everybody's fleeing. But I'll tell you this, nobody is fleeing Jerusalem. So we're going to stop here for 1 minute. And a little bit earlier, we spoke about a man by the name of Hadrian. Hadrian was an emperor of the Roman Empire, roughly the year 135 CE. During his reign, there was a great Jewish warrior by the name of Simon Bar Kokhba, right? And Simon Bar Kokhba led an uprising against the Romans, quite like you saw during the Great Revolt, when we fought against the Romans and the temple was destroyed. Except Shimon was very successful. In fact, he threw out the entire Roman army and all the Roman dignitaries and everybody who had any type of Roman influence on the Jewish people. And we had total independence once again. So we printed our own coins once again. Jews from around the world began to return to the land of Israel. We made blueprints to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, to rebuild the temple. And that really set Hadrian. And Hadrian brings half of the Roman army, and he completely destroys the revolt. In fact, according to our scriptures, it says that there was blood in a city known as Beitar, which is not far from where I live, in the city of Hebron, about halfway between Jerusalem and Hebron, the tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, which we hope in a future tour with AIC we'll be able to visit, is that there was blood in the streets from there that flowed all the way to the Mediterranean. He destroys Jerusalem. Remember, I said it before when we were looking at the map, destroys it down to the ground, and he rebuilds a Roman city. And every Roman city has a Decumanus and a Cardo. Folks, scan over here. This is the ancient Cardo that was built by Hadrian. But who built it for Hadrian? Jewish slaves. Now, see if you can take a closer look. Take a look at the top of that pillar right there, right? At the top of the pillar, there's a Corinthian capital. On top of that Corinthian capital, you can see there's some stones on top of all those pillars. Where else do we see Jews placing stones on graves at cemeteries, right? And there's a deep meaning behind that. We're not going to get into it right now. But when I saw those stones over there, my first thought, come follow me over here. My first thought was, wow, how amazing is that? That after 2,000 years, the Jewish people who have returned here to the land of Israel did not forget the Jews who died under the boot of Roman oppression, being forced to build this idolatrous, this idol-worshiping society, a city for them. And he changes the name of Jerusalem. He actually calls it Elio Capitolina. He names after some Jerusalem after 1,400 years isn't called Jerusalem anymore. It's called Elio Capitolina. And I thought, how cool is that? That these Jews place stones over there to remember the Jews that were killed. Until one day I saw little kids like this. Look over, there's little kids walking here, right? And you see some kids over here, and you see the kids returning here to Jerusalem. Until one day I saw some of these kids that you see walking on the streets right now pick up small stones, and they were trying to throw one up to see who can get one to land at the top. And I know many of you are laughing, because when I first saw that, I began to laugh. Because what I thought represented death actually represented life. That those stones represent life. The Jewish returning of the Jewish people here to the land of Israel. But then I even went one step further. And I said to myself, you know what? If you had a time machine and you went back in time 2,000 years, and you saw that Jewish slave building the Cardo down below, under, his head under the boot of a Roman soldier, and with his last breath, he's about to say the Shema because he's about to die, and you whisper in his ear and you say, hey, don't worry, your great, 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 great grandchildren will return one day here to Jerusalem. I promise, because I was there, us here right now. Time machine, we went back 2,000 years. That Jewish slave who's about to die would say, I know. And you would look at him and be like, what do you mean you know? He would say, I read the book. What book? I read the Bible. You read the Bible? What are you talking about? I read the prophecies. The prophecies, yes, the prophets told us in the book of Zechariah that one day This is God speaking through Zechariah. I will bring the Jewish people from the east and from the west and from all around, and I will return them to the land of Israel and to Jerusalem. And you'll see kids playing in the streets, an old man with staff in hand. Well, guess what? That's what we're witnessing right now. And when you guys come here on your trips, whether it's with your organization, whether it's synagogue, whether you're a church or as a family or celebrating a bar or bat mitzvah, and you come here, you get to be part of that prophecy that's being fulfilled right now as we speak, as we're witnessing here on this tour. Look, you can see kids are here. You can see old people, staff in here, walk here, a word for word, exactly the way it was written, exactly the way it was told to us 25 plus 100 years ago. That's what's taking place right now. And the best part about it is you get to walk on those stones. In fact, I really wanted to take you down to walk on those stones with you, but I noticed that the gate was closed. And that's because tourism is at a standstill here in Israel. Even if you guys wanted to come, which I know you all do, you wouldn't be able to. But, and that, therefore, the Cardo, and you can see there's like one of the shops over here in the Cardo has been shuttered, has been shut down because most of the business is coming from tourists. What's going on, Rabbi? How you doing? That's Rabbi Eli Deutsch, my friends. Big tzaddik, big rabbi here in the Old City. He's written many svarim, many books. Look him up, Eli Deutsch. He's got this great book called Choose Jewish, right? Many of us were Jewish by birth, but how many of us actually choose our Jewish identities? And we take an active role in our Jewish identities. Let me just see if we can get down here. Yes, we can. Fantastic. Come with me down here. Hopefully the internet here will hold up as we go down, right? In Jerusalem, the lower you go, the older it gets, right? Because the ruins are down below. And I'm just gonna have my cameraman swing around over here because what we have is a beautiful mural of what this street looked like in its heyday after it's constructed.
David, we lost you.
You have shops and you have, and what you have in this mural though, what you have in this mural is a boy from the 21st century and a girl from like 1800 years ago. And come close here, Mayor. What is this girl handing this boy? It's handing him a pomegranate. Now, pomegranate is one of the 7 right now, but it's one of the 7 special species of Israel. And it represents prosperity, it represents fertility, and that's because of all of the seeds that are inside. And according to Jewish tradition, pomegranate, which correlates to the 613 mitzvot. She's saying, hey, you and I, we dress differently. Of course, we're
David, we can't hear you, so we can see the picture. Can you get to a better place to describe what you're saying?
Then you also are just like me. Because who are you? In the end of the day, my friends, listen to this, listen closely. At the end of the day, are we choosing good or are we choosing evil? And we know when we're doing the right thing and we know when we're doing the wrong thing. And if we're basing our decisions off of our ancient wisdom, our halachot, which some people say as law, but really means tolech, means to go the way of the Jew. If you're basing yourself on our more 1,000 years, then guess what? We're still the same. In fact, I know we are. We're still the same people that we were during the days of King David. Come, we got lots more things to see. Come follow me. And we're going to have just a little bit of a walk through the Jewish quarter. So Cheryl, if anybody has typed in a question in the chat, or if you want me to delve a little bit further into something as we walk through the Jewish quarter here, please chime on in and let me know.
David, we do have some questions, but I
Yeah,
think
sure.
based on your location, we're having some trouble seeing and hearing. We haven't really heard much. I think it will get better now
Okay.
that you're out of there, right?
All right, fine. If that happens again, Cheryl, just jump on board, let me know, or send a message in our chat, and I will try and get out of that location. We do have to understand that when we go into the older sections of the old city, these stones, it's not like concrete or wood with like just some stone on the outside. These buildings are solid stone. And as a result, those Wi-Fi signals aren't able to penetrate them very well. And so what we call klita here, the reception can become a little shoddy, but we'll do our best to stay in areas that are a little bit more open so we have good reception. And one of those areas is right here. This is known as the Rova, which means the big square. This here is the main square in the Jewish quarter. And Mayor, go ahead and do a nice little 360-degree spin, nice and slow, so everybody can see this big, beautiful square that we have here in the Jewish quarter that is known as the Rova. And this is all residential over here. Most of the people you see—
David, we don't have any video right now. It's black.
We still don't have any video. Let me take a look.
We hear you better.
Well, I see that the video is working. Let me try this. How about now?
Better. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic.
Back.
All right, so do a little 360 degrees so they can see it was dark for them. This is known as the Rova. This is the main square in the Jewish quarter. These are all residential buildings around us. You can see the menorah over here in the glass case made with 2.5 pounds of gold. That is kosher. That is certified to be accepted in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple when it's rebuilt soon, hopefully in our days, maybe even today. Please God, we want our temple, right? Peaceful ways.
I think you're frozen, David. We're seeing just a still.
Okay, fine. You know what? Like I said, the internet sometimes here in the old city is a little bit shoddy. What we're gonna do is, Lee, let me know when the picture gets a little bit better, okay? And I'm just gonna walk to an area that I believe is gonna have a little bit of a better—
now we see you move. Now the video's back and we see you moving.
All right, fantastic. So you're not gonna see me for a minute, but that's only because I took the reins of the camera as we were doing a little troubleshooting here to make sure that we have good video as the sun has finally set and dusk is upon us, and we are walking through the Jewish quarter, and this is the main route to the Western Wall. You can see here's like a little shop selling Judaica and trinkets and souvenirs for people when tourists used to come visit here. And you can see here is some replicas of the Aron HaKodesh, right? The cherubim, the Ark of the Covenant, the leaders of the Jewish people. You can see the spies when they came into the land of Israel, Kiddush cups over here, Chanukiyot, and menorahs, and mezuzot, and kippahs. And please God, tourists will be able to come again soon in order to purchase these and to bring them home in order to remember their trip to Israel. And of course, this is also the food court of the Jewish quarter. You can see some of the locals here buying some shawarma, right, some falafel. Everybody's got to eat. And of course, when you're done, we want to have a little something sweet. We got a nice little waffle bar here, a little ice cream. There's a burger joint. Come get burgers. And I love the name of this place. They call it Holy Bagel. Every bagel's got a hole in it, but this bagel doesn't just have a hole. It's holy. Why? Because it's from the holy city. It's from Jerusalem. So we're just walking through this little area, and these arches I'm going to talk about in a minute because they're about 1,000 years old, but we might lose a little reception underneath them because they're 1,000 years old. And these were built by the German Teutonic Knights. And the Teutonic Knights were part of the Sixth Crusade. And they built this building that you can see in front of you right now on the screen. And that is a church, a hospice, and a place in order to provide much needed essentials to the pilgrims, the Christian pilgrims from Europe that were coming to visit at that time. It really is a very, very large building that had many, many, many different rooms and served many different purposes. But what I want to take a focus on right now, I'm going to walk down these stairs here, is on the door frame of this ancient building, you now are going to see a mezuzah, right? A mezuzah. Why a mezuzah? If this used to be one day a church, and you can see inside over here, you can see there's the apse and where the table where the priest or the pastor or whoever it was at that time there would go ahead and give communion to their congregation. So why do you have a mezuzah over there? Well, this building is now owned by a yeshiva known as Aish Torah. And as a Jewish institution owning this place, it's a mitzvah to put a mezuzah on it. So of course they put a mezuzah. Now I've been guiding here in the Old City for 12 years. And I'll tell you that I've noticed Christian groups that come here, and of course they want to look at this as Crusader architecture. It's a part of Christian history, even though the Crusades were a very, very dark and ugly period of time, and I don't think anybody denies that. But they see the mezuzah and they say, why is there a mezuzah there? There can't be a mezuzah there. And I've seen some people actually have like a real history feel, like they really are upset by the fact that there is a mezuzah on this old, what was once church property. And then I also notice on their wrist, right? They don't just have a watch, but they'll have like a little bracelet, a little band that will say WWJD. What would Jesus do? And I always laugh when I see that, and they have this history here, because what would he do? He would put a mezuzah up on the door because he was keeping the mitzvahs. When I guide Christian groups here in Israel, one of the things I do this for all my groups, but talking about Christians visiting Israel, is I invite them to my house for a Shabbat meal. I invite all my guests to come to my house if they want to for Shabbat, to celebrate the Sabbath with me. But I invite these Christian groups because I tell them, hey, you're coming here in order to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, or you're coming here in order to to delve in deep the Christian scriptures. Well, if you really want to connect with with this figure Jesus, why not also tap into his faith? Don't you think that he kept the Sabbath? Don't you think that he put up mezuzot? Don't you think he put on tefillin? Of course he would have. So as a Christian, if you want to connect to that, please reach out to me. And when you come and you visit Israel, I would be happy to go ahead and to invite you into my home and to tell you all about it, because I think it's really a wonderful and amazing thing. So let's head now down. Hopefully it won't be a long line because we have to go through security as we go on down. Now I'm just gonna flip my camera mode for just a minute. Nobody freak out. I'm gonna put it back. I just have to check some stats over here. So bear with me for 1 minute. There we go, perfecto. And now we're going back to our beautiful landscape mode. And we're gonna flip the camera around and we're gonna use our awesome cameraman. And we are heading down to the Western Wall. You know what? Most of you were with me before. Instead of getting bogged down at security, let's do an overlook of the Western Wall. Come with me this way. This is gonna be even better because let me just check. We still have a good solid half hour and we want to delve into the other two quarters as well. So come with me this way as we once again pass the German hospice, who also built this area, those arches to the left. Now, why did they build here in the first place? This was the 6th and the last crusade, right? And these were Germans. Most of the crusades, the early crusades, were led by French knights. And so when the Germans finally jumped on board and they came here, this was the only section of town that was still left for them to build. And that's because this used to be also was where a lot of Jews lived. And we know what the Crusaders did to the Jewish people who were living here. they completely annihilated and destroyed and murdered every single Jew that was here in the old city. During the Crusader period, during that Christian period, there were no Jews that were living here in the old city. They really only returned when a great and righteous rabbi, a sage even, by the name of the Ramban, came to Jerusalem in roughly the last quarter of this 13th century, say 1267 roughly. When he came here and he reestablished the Jewish community. And there's still the synagogue that his followers built here, and it's still being used 800 years later. Just amazing. Here's a big, beautiful building I'll just mention. It's called the Asia World Heritage Center. I actually learned here for about 4 years. From 2007 to 2011, I was learning here in the old city. Don't get sidetracked. Keep on following me through here. We might lose internet for a second.
David?
And hopefully, yes.
We had a question about whether Jews are allowed to live in the Muslim and Christian Armenian Quarter and vice versa. Do they have to stay in the quarter?
Fantastic. That's a great question, whoever asked that. And we will talk a little bit about that when we get into the Muslim Quarter, because I'll actually show you some of the Jewish homes in the Muslim Quarter. But I will just say one thing very quickly here right now, that of course it's a Jewish city and it's a free city. So if there was a Muslim or Armenian or Christian that wanted to purchase a home in the Jewish Quarter, there's no law that says that they can't. Okay, they can purchase. It's a free democratic society that we live in here. Most people do tend to live in neighborhoods of like-minded and similar people. So you do have some divisions similar to really what you have in America, right? Whether it's divided racially or whether it's divided economically, whether it's divided, religiously, you do have some natural divisions only because of like-minded people wanting to live with other like-minded individuals. But right now we're overlooking the Western Wall, right? And the Dome of the Rock, the Golden Dome that you can see just over there. A lot of people get upset when they see the Golden Dome because they're like, that's where the temple should be. That's where the first temple is, or the second temple. It's the only place the temple can be. And why is there this Muslim piece of architecture here where the temple should stand? But I have to tell you, my friends, when I see that, I'm elated. I'm overfilled with joy and gratitude. Gratitude? How can you be saying that, David? Listen, you and I, we all know that this is the rightful place of the temple, and one day it will be rebuilt because we read that in our scriptures. But at the same time, that building, that Golden Dome, is roughly about 1,300 years old. It was built in the year 691. It's the oldest piece of Islamic architecture anywhere in the world. And what has it been providing? It has been keeping that place safe. Safe from what? Safe from development. Maybe there'd be a mall there. Maybe there'd be a tennis courts or a swimming pool or anything, but something that has been preserving that site until you and I are meritorious enough that we should see the rebuilding, right? It's up to you and I, whether or not we're going to see it in our lifetime by how we act to one another. We have to treat one another with kindness, with love, with empathy, and especially now in a world pandemic where people are suffering in our own communities. And I know AIC, I'm sorry for plugging them so much, but it's one of the best organizations I've worked with. And I've worked with many, many different organizations that they're not only just bringing Israel to the masses, whether Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or anything, but they're also helping those in need here in Israel, including myself. So if I can go ahead and just give a plug right now, you guys are all going to receive an email. And in that email from the AIC, you're going to have an option to hit a link in order to donate. Or if you're watching on Facebook Live right now, right there on the page of the AIC, the Atlanta Israel Coalition, there's a donate button. Please donate to them and mention that you were on this tour. And the AIC said that part of those proceeds will go to me. And as you guys all know from the previous tour, I just said, I'm gonna give you this free tour because I felt so bad that the candlelighting ceremony, which was so beautiful, also occupied so much time. So please donate to AIC and have that empathy during this time so that we can be meritorious of seeing the rebuilding of the temple. That's what we really all want. But here, take a close look over there. You can see the western wall all lit up. You can see all the little cubicles over there, keeping people socially distanced as they pray. Unfortunately, that's what we need to do at this time. But all that you see right there that's lit up is about a tenth of the entire size of the western wall. That's only about 180 feet. The entire length of the western wall is 1,500 feet wide or 1,500 feet long and 1,000 feet wide. In fact, it's the largest platform that was ever built by mankind that we know of until this day. This was a massive undertaking. And guess what? No slaves were used. No slaves, right? Slaves were common in those days, not just in the Jewish world, but really just in the entire world altogether. No slaves were used because this is a house of worship for whom? For Jews? Well, obviously, right? But it says right in the scripture, right in the Bible, God is saying this. He's saying this is a place of worship, a house of prayer for all nations, for everyone. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We are all one. The divisions between us is just an illusion. Your energy, I'm energy, the space between us is energy. It's all the same energy. We're just radiating in different frequencies. And as soon as we really understand that and we actually love one another like we love ourselves, another basic fundamental point of Jewish philosophy is to love yourself, love your neighbor like yourself, then we'll be meritorious of seeing the Beit HaMikdash, of seeing the temple rebuilt. So start now, hit that donate button and come with me into the Muslim Quarter. Cheryl, if you got some questions, this would be a great time to chime on in and let me know.
Okay, terrific. Yes, of course I do. Someone asked what the purpose of the covered ramp is.
Wonderful question. That covered ramp that you saw before. So Israel is on a massive fault line. In fact, it puts Andrea's fault line in California to shame. This is in fact, it's the longest fault line in the entire world. It's called the Syrian African Rift. And it stretches for 3,600 miles or 6,000 kilometers for the Europeans and Canadians that are with us. And there are earthquakes here all the time. In fact, last week, there was a little bit of earthquake that was felt in the southern region of Israel, in the Negev, in a city known as Eilat. And in 2003, and I was here in Jerusalem already in 2003, there was a powerful enough of a seismic shift that pictures fell off my walls, books off my bookshelf, and everybody in the city felt it, and windows were broken in the big, tall high rises. And the original ramp, that was an earthen ramp that went up to the Temple Mount. It was what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't stable anymore. Let's put it that way. It wasn't stable anymore. And so they made a temporary wooden ramp. It was supposed to be temporary because we were going to build this really big, beautiful, permanent structure with pictures and videos about the Temple Mount, about the two temples that were built and the history of the area. But unfortunately, our Arab cousins who are living here said that really what we're trying to do is to destroy the Western Wall and destroy the Temple Mount in order that we can rebuild the temple. And the United Nations came in and they stopped this from happening. So that temporary structure, which is the only access point to the Temple Mount for non-Muslims, has become quite permanent and has been there for roughly about 17 years. And I'm going to ask another question in just a minute, but up ahead, you can see there's some police officers here. And if we were to continue straight, it would lead us to the Temple Mount. But again, this is an entranceway because the Islamic Authority controls the Temple Mount, that non-Muslims aren't allowed to enter there. So there's some officers here making sure that everybody who passes is allowed to go up there. And of course, also so that people are wearing their masks. Also a very important thing today. It's not like in America. Here in Israel, we must wear our mask in public places. Unlike in America, we must wear our masks. It's not optional, and you can get a $125 fine for not wearing your mask. So we are continuing, and we are jumping into the Muslim Quarter right now. And sometimes when I come into the Muslim Quarter, I almost feel like I gotta take out my passport and I need to show it to somebody because it should get stamped, because I'm like going into another world. And you guys are gonna feel that as we come into here. It's just a completely different vibe and a completely different scene from what's happening. Now, as you can see, remember I said you're gonna see scooters. So you really can't get cars down here, although every now and then you might see some crazy guy driving his car through here. But you do see a lot of scooters or these little mini cars you can see over here that can wind its way through the quarter. All right, come. I want few important places I want to just show you here as we walk through the Muslim quarter. And one is the street that's coming up on my right-hand side. And this is called the Cotton Market. And this is all Crusader architecture, roughly about 1,000 years old. And this is where the cotton was sold. That's why it's called the Cotton Market. It's still a marketplace today. And this is really for the local Muslims that live here in the Old City or in East Jerusalem. This is the mall. This is where they're going to come to buy, clothing, jewelry, anniversaries, school supplies, you name it. But it's also one of the main entry points onto the Temple Mount. Now, I went very quickly and I said that the Islamic Authority controls the Temple Mount. It is Israel, and Israel ultimately has control over it. But we gave the religious council for the Muslims, known as the Waqf, permission to run and make the guidelines and the rules for the Temple Mount. And they said non-Muslims can only visit the Temple Mount twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and they're not allowed to pray. So me, outwardly being Jewish, you can see I have tzitzit on and I wear a head covering. They know that before I eat or drink anything, that I say a blessing. I'm not allowed to drink anything when I go up to the Temple Mount because they don't want me saying a blessing up there, because non-Muslims aren't allowed to say blessings over there. But tides are turning. You can see we made peace with a few of our neighbors, and it looks like Saudi Arabia might be right around the corner. And hopefully that this law will change and people of all nations will once again be able to worship at the place, which is a house of prayer for all nations. That's really what the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is a place of unification. It's supposed to bind us together through our similarities, not to highlight our differences. Obviously, there's differences between Jews, Muslims, and Christians, but really there's more that unites us. We agree on most things, especially issues of morality. So as a result, really we should focus on what unites us, not on what divides us. And speaking of divisions, I also just want to say is that this street was primarily Jewish up until 1929 when there were riots. And then of course, in 1948, when the Jordanians took control and they kicked all the Jews out. And you can see this used to be a Jewish building, because if you take a nice close look here, you guys will see it. You can see this is where the mezuzah was, and it's bashed out and it's broken, and the mezuzah was removed. And that has been done on most of the door frames throughout this street. Again, this street's called Haggai. This was part of the Jewish quarter until 1929. And of course, in 1948, when all the Jews were kicked out. But just like us, they got their own food court. They got some falafel balls over here, some nice authentic Arabic food, and hummus and other delicacies when you come visit. But look, all the shops here are closed. And not just because of the time of the day, right? It's 5 p.m. already here. It's the end of the day. No, these are closed because some of these are tourist shops and the tourists aren't here. And they sell things like, the Arab bandana called a kafia, and they sell frankincense and myrrh, the incense that was brought when, according to Christian theology, when Jesus was born, right? The 3 kings came to visit. They brought gifts. 2 of them were frankincense and myrrh. Very, very common incense. You can see Jews walking down the street. You can see Muslims walking down the street. People think things are so black and white. Things are so divided here. We really do live together. So we're going to try and walk a little bit quicker, because you can see these big arches over here. Again, most of these are 1,000+ years old. Very, very thick, solid stones. And the reception is not so good here. And maybe the video is going in and out. Cheryl, can you let me know if I'm coming in clear?
You're definitely coming in, and very grateful
Wonderful.
for you showing us around. There are a few more
Wonderful.
questions.
All right, give me one.
How is it determined who is Muslim? Is there an ethnic ID card there?
Great.
Okay, now we lost you, David. Hopefully we'll be back The beauty of a live tour is that we could be there with you live. Unfortunately, internet isn't always our friend when doing a live tour. So thank you all for holding on and bearing with us.
Is a citizen. Yeah, okay, come. We're losing internet. Okay. The reception will be a little bit better now. And the
Yes,
question
you're better.
was, is there a different ID? Great. The question was, is there a different ID card, or is there some way of like segregating the population? And I have to say that is a resounding no, right? All citizens here are treated equal, just like in America. Now, that is not to say, like in America, you do have racism, right? Anytime you have a minority and a majority, there are going to be difficulties that face minorities. I think that really is around the world. And Israel has policies that are put into place in order to try and equalize as much as possible and those opportunities. And one of those is that for most Muslims who are here, you know, there's they are have a different standard of being accepted into college. There's different programs in order that they can get scholarships much easier. And again, trying to equal the playing field between the different minorities and the Jewish people who are here. And even amongst the Jewish people, you got religious, you got not religious, you got somewhat religious, you got this type of religious, that type of religious, this one wears this hat, this one wears that. You know, we are really a very, very diverse society, and most people are people. In other words, most people are good, and most people just want to get along, and most people want to have success, and most people want to see their kids happy and want to see them get married, and they're not really interested in depriving that from somebody else, right? They're not trying to cause harm to somebody else. They want to see everybody succeed. And this is a beautiful spot of it. And here, I'm just going to take the camera for 1 second and kind of show you what we're looking at here. We are now on the Via della Rosa, right? And this is known in Latin as the way of suffering. And according to most Christian traditions, this is the path that Jesus took from when he was sentenced to death, when he was sentenced to be executed, into the actual execution itself. And we are now on station number 5. This is station number 5. There are 14 stations all together, but we're in the Muslim Quarter. And not only are we in the Muslim Quarter, but you can also see some Israeli flags flying right there. There's a yeshiva right here. So you have a yeshiva, right, which is a house of Jewish, a school of Jewish thought. And you have some Jewish homes that are over here. Somebody asked if Jews can live in the Muslim Quarter. Other people can live in whatever quarter they want to live in. And we have a church right here, station number 5. So you got all 3 of the big monotheistic religions here in Israel, literally living side by side. I'm hoping that the internet is going to keep up. This is station number 5. Along the way, we're going to pass station number 6. And this is, according to Christian theology, a woman by the name of Veronica wiped the sweat and the blood and the tears off of Jesus's face, and his impression was put onto the napkin, onto the handkerchief, and that became known as the true icon, or the Vera Iconica. And the woman's name was Veronica. So that's station number 6. But we're just beeline. All these stores, which I would usually stop to talk about because a lot of these stores sell artifacts and archaeology. Because who's really buying the stuff? Not locals, but rather the tourists. And so we're just gonna Jewish Quarter, and when we get to the top, we're gonna be on that cardo, right? But we're gonna be a part of the cardo that has been Hey, Mashuka. We are going to be on a street that's filled with shops for the local, to assume that most of it's going to be open. This is station numbers, all hours of the day, all hours of the night. Many of them carrying a cross with them, and connecting to their faith and to their tradition. Today we have none of it. We can see some of the local kids here coming home, maybe from school, from work. Everybody wearing their masks. Talk about that. Unifying aspect. Go on, Cheryl.
You were in and out for volume. Somebody asked if there's a opportunity that all 4 quarters celebrate something together. Are there?
I have never, yeah, great question. I have never heard of anything where all 4 quarters come together and celebrate together. Now there are cultural events, non-religious, non-sectarian, like the Light Festival. In October, there's the Jazz Festival, and all 4 quarters have different artists, different exhibits during these cultural events. And of course, people from all quarters, everybody's walking around, everybody's not celebrating life and not celebrating anything religious. There's no sectarian celebration, like a unified thing where everybody's coming together. Not yet, at least, but we are praying and hoping for that, please God, one day. Now we are going to walk down this street, and you can see all the shops are open. Why are all the shops open? All the shops are open because
David, the video's out again, audio. So you may want to keep walking to get to a better spot. David?
this isn't for tourists. This is the local population. This is where you're coming to buy your kids,
Okay, it seems we lost David for a moment, but he's back on and hopefully will be with us very soon. We still have a few questions. Some of them I could actually answer in the meantime.
All right.
Nope.
All right.
I don't need to. Welcome back, David.
No.
Welcome back.
Before, but that part of the Cardo, thank you so much. That part of the Cardo was constructed by the Crusaders. And so the arches that we're walking underneath were 1,000 years old. And again, not good for Wi-Fi, but we're almost at the Church of Sepulcher. We're now in the Christian Quarter.
David, your video
Here is
sideways.
Crusader.
Oh, we're seeing the video sideways.
Sideways.
Yeah, up, yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Thank you. I think you fixed it.
What about now?
Perfect.
What about now?
Good. It's good.
It's perfect.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. Here you can see these are Armenian priests are coming by here in the back, and you can tell by their hoods. All right, their hoods have little points at the top, which represent Mount Ararat. And Mount Ararat used to be in Armenia. It's now in Turkey, and this is where Armenians believe that Noah's Ark, after the flood, where it landed. I'm just showing you this little lit up building right here because this is part of the facade of a Crusader period church that was built by the Germans. And the Germans built a Catholic church for their Catholics, and they also built this church for the Lutheran population. Remember, Martin Luther was from Germany. So this was a Lutheran church. And usually this area, even at nighttime, when the tourists are here, these are all restaurants and shops, and it's open all night long. People hanging out here. You can even see some Christmas lights down there, which you don't really see very often here in Israel. In fact, next week, when it becomes Christmas, you won't even know that it's December 25th. You don't hear any Christmas carols. There's no Christmas decorations up. And that's because we live in a Jewish country. But here, we're just walking through this gate right here, excuse us. And we are in the courtyard of the Church of Sepulcher. And it is a little bit dark, but I'm gonna stand. And let's see, make sure you get a little bit of that building right there. You know what, come down with me a little bit because the door's open and maybe we'll be able to peek a little bit inside. Oh, they just closed the door. They saw me coming, they closed the door. All right, go back up to the top, watch out. And I will stand right here. Make sure that we could see the whole thing. So this is the Church of Sepulcher. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the tour, almost an hour and a half ago, is that this is the Holy of Holies for Christians, right? Christian pilgrims, most, not all, but most. Evangelicals and Protestants usually visit another place called the Garden Tomb. That's where they say that the crucifixion resurrection took place. But many Christians, Catholics, Syrian Orthodox, Armenians, Coptics, many different Christian denominations believe that this is the place where Jesus was crucified. And of course, the basis of their belief system is in the resurrection, right? They believe that this is where it took place. The original church, believe it or not, this old building behind me is not the original. The original church was built about 1700 years ago. This pillar that I'm standing on right now, this base of this pillar is actually part of the original. You got little bits and pieces of the original that were here. It was built by Helene, who is the mother of Constantine, 1700 years ago. And she came and she said, this is where this miracle took place, this is where this thing took place, and so on and so forth. And that's why a lot of the churches that were built during the Byzantine period were built in places that she said, this is where it took place. But what was here prior to Helena? So when the Romans ruled here, this is where their main temple, their idolatrous temple, their idol worshiping temple to Venus was located. And so if you wanted to say, okay, what is this place? Why would they want to change this place into a church? Well, in ancient times, the policies of a conquering nation upon another nation, everybody were idol worshippers except for Jews. So the idea of having many gods was normal, right? Not normal to Jews, not normal to Christians, not normal to Muslims today. But back in the day, that was very normal, right? Today, Hindus have lots of gods, right? Back in the day, everybody had lots of gods. So when you built whoever you just conquered church or temple, what you're saying is that my God is more powerful than your God. Not that you have to throw your God out of the way, but make sure on your mantle above your fireplace, you have a place for our God as well. And it was a place to show your dominance. And that is why when archaeologists find ancient cities and ancient places, they will find the holy relics of many different periods of time on top of one another, because people built their holy places on top of other people's holy places. Unfortunately for that was what brought upon the Crusades. The Crusades said, you destroyed our church, we're going to take back the Holy Land, and you have the Crusades. And so what you have here is the church is now a Crusader church. It's now a Crusader church. And Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe we have about 5 minutes or so. So come with me, guys. On another tour, we'll go a little bit more in depth, or maybe what I can do for, if you guys want this, make sure you write to the Atlanta Israel Coalition when you donate and say that you would love to have a recording of a tour of the Church of Sepulcher, because you can't go in there live because the internet doesn't work because it's all old. But I could make a video of it and send it to the AIC, and the AIC can go ahead and forward that along to all of you who are interested in that. But this is the Christian Quarter that we're walking through right now. This all shops selling souvenirs, holy water from the Jordan, and and crosses that were carved out of olive wood. Part of walking through for Christians, through the Christian, you have these large paving stones. So they redid the sewer systems in the old city. But when they were redoing that, they found these large paving stones. And archaeologists, these paving stones from the Second Temple period. We got something very loud that's gonna be passing by us. Oops. Going quite slow. Let's just change our direction.
Technology is not with us today,
So
David.
these
You're frozen. And we're
stones,
breathing out.
and they, oh,
Here.
all right, come with me.
David, can you hear me?
All right. I'm good.
And unfortunately, we can't hear or see.
Go very quickly to a place that is. Let me know when you can continue, when you hear me. Can you hear me?
Can hear you a bit now. Thank you.
Hello?
Oh, the video is still paused.
Hello? I'm
David?
hoping we're going to be in an open place in just a few moments.
Okay.
And you should be able to hear me just fine. Okay, great. Okay, no problem. Yeah, you can, yeah, hold on. Bear with me. We're almost in an open area. All right, how about now? Can you hear me a little bit? Shar, let me know when you can hear me.
I can hear
me know
you,
when you can
but the video is
The
frozen.
video a little bit.
There's no video.
Cheryl? All right, great.
Oh, here you are.
All right, hold on one second. This worked. Yeah, you can see the video?
Yes. Now we
Okay,
can
good.
see.
So, you know, I've given literally since this pandemic started, dozens of virtual tours of the old city for organizations as well as private families who want to get together virtually with other family members around the States, around the world. And I've given, you know, a private tour on Zoom for all of them. And some days are better than others. But like you said, it really all has to do just with the technology. What we were seeing before were paving stones that were discovered that date back to the Second Temple period. So Christians love walking on those stones as if you believe in Jesus and you believe he was here during the Second Temple period, tossing over the money changers and, you know, the stories you can read in the Christian scriptures. So those would have been the stones that he walked on top of. So imagine walking on the same stones. Very, very meaningful, very, very powerful experience in the middle of the marketplace. There's just so much history and so much to discover. So as you can see behind me, you have Jaffa Gate. Yep.
You were telling us that some of the stores were open. We didn't get to hear why. So people are asking why the stores are open right now.
Well, some stores, like this is prime location. This is right at the entrance of the old city. So they still have some business that's coming here. And some business is better than no business, right? You got to try and make some money if you can. So some people who are coming, maybe from the Galilee, maybe from the Negev, different parts, and they want to buy a souvenir from Jerusalem. These are locals, right? We're closed to international tourists right now. And locals who also want to pick up some type of trinket can come here and they can purchase something. Guys, we are at Jaffa Gate, which is just down over there. I do apologize if the internet was a bit in and out. Nothing we can really do about that. But I do want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to all of you for tuning in. I want to say thank you to the AIC, to the Atlanta Israel Coalition. I do beg of you guys to support this wonderful organization. If you are on Facebook right now, hit the donate button, give what you can, give from your heart, give from your wallet. Don't overextend yourself, but please, it's the end of the year. It's a 501c3. It's tax deductible. If you can make a large contribution, Cheryl, Lee, they volunteer their time. These are amazing, amazing people that believe in Israel. None of that money is going to them. It's all going to bring you excellent programming and connecting people to Israel. So if you believe in Israel and you enjoy this program, please donate and mention that you tuned into our tour, because some of that, the vote proceeds will go to me, who unfortunately, for the most part, I am out of work because I am a tour guide And if you guys want a private tour, contact the AIC, find out how to get in touch with me. Look me up on Facebook, David Sussman Israel Tours. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to give you a tour. Thank you again to Cheryl, to Lee, to everybody for tuning in. And I'll see you guys all on the next tour, because we're going to bring you some great programming. But with whatever time we have left, I am happy to take any questions, Cheryl, if there are any.
Somebody wanted to know if people are buying property in the old city, or can you only rent it?
No, there's property all the time for sale in the old city. But like I said, we're talking Manhattan prices here. This is the holy city, limited amount of real estate. You're lucky if you can afford it, that's for sure. And even if you can't afford it, you're lucky if you get the opportunity to actually purchase something. And you know, hey, if you're interested in buying something, let me know. I'll be your scout here in the Holy Land.
Thanks. So it seems there's a big interest in the tour of the church. I definitely look forward to sharing that with viewers. I hope people will follow the Atlanta Israel Coalition page. David will be posting more tours with you, hopefully. Thank you so much for giving us this tour today, and look forward to working with you some more in the future. Definitely want to
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Thank our promotional partners again. I want to thank everyone for tuning in from all over the world. Have to thank our sponsors. If you value programming as they do, please consider giving. If you can't give, we are a true grassroots organization, and we would love your support. Please, you can volunteer, get in touch with me. I would be thrilled to answer any questions you have. Thank you to the Evans Family Foundation, to Martin A. Goldberg, to the Morbido Wealth Management Group and Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta. Thank you again. And please reach out to AIC. Any questions? Again, if you want to volunteer, we'd love to have you. We've been around now for 2 years and counting. And our goal is to unite and educate. Grateful that you're here with us and a part of that. Thank you.